what I'm actually reading, unlike last time, where it was an absolute fucking nightmare. Robert Norman Moss, born October 29th, 1942, died July 4th, 1995, was an American painter, art instructor, and television host. He was the creator and host of The Joy of Painting, an instructional television program that aired from 1983 to 1994 on PBS in the United States, and also aired in Canada, Latin America, and Europe. Ross went from being a public television personality in the 80s and 90s to being an internet celebrity in the 21st century, with his talent and kindness leading to major popularity with fans on YouTube, Twitch, and many other websites many years after his death. Ross was born in Daytona Beach, Florida, to Jack and Ollie Ross, a Cherokee carpenter and a waitress respectively, and raised in Orlando, Florida. As a child, Ross entertained himself by caring for injured animals, purportedly including an armadillo, a snake, and an alligator. One of these animals, a squirrel named Peapod, full name Peapod the Pocket Squirrel, was featured most prominently in a few episodes of his show. Another squirrel, one with epilepsy Bob called Squirrely Wirrily Brown, which was given 6 months to live by a vet, but Bob talked about her 4 to 5 years after getting her, was also on the show less frequently. She was usually kept at home in Bob Ross's basement in a big cage next to where she'd watch him paint. He had a half-brother, Jim, whom he mentioned in passing on his show. Ross dropped out of high school in the 9th grade to work as a carpenter with his father, Jack Ross, when he lost part of his left index finger. This, however, did not affect the way that he held his palette whilst painting. In 1961, 18-year-old Ross enlisted in the United States Air Force and was put into service as a medical records technician. He eventually rose to the rank of Master Sergeant and served as the first sergeant of the U.S. Air Force at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska, where he first saw the snow and mountains that later became recurring themes in his artwork. He developed his quick painting technique to create art for sale during brief daily work breaks. Having held military positions that required him to be, in his own words, tough and mean, the guy who makes you scrub the latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work. Ross decided that if he ever left the military, he would never yell or raise his voice again. He carried out this promise by never playing a Dark Souls game for his entire life. During his 20-year tenure with the US Air Force, Ross developed a taste for painting after attending an art class at the Anchorage USO Club. He found himself frequently at odds with many of his painting instructors, who were more or less interested in abstract painting. In Ross's own words, they'd tell you what makes a tree, but they wouldn't tell you how to paint a tree. Ross was working as a part-time bartender when he discovered a TV show called The Magic of Oil Painting, hosted by German painter Bill Alexander. I am out of coffee. Alexander touted the 16th century style of painting called alla prima, Italian for first attempt, better known as wet on wet, that allowed him to finish a painting in a little under 30 minutes. Ross studied and became quite good at alla prima through Alexander's show and began selling Alaskan landscapes painted on the inside of novelty gold mining pans. Eventually, Ross's income from gold pan sales surpassed his military salary, He retired from the Air Force in 1981 with the rank of Master Sergeant after 20 years of service. He first went to Florida and studied painting under Alexander, then joined the Alexander Magic Art Supplies Company and became a traveling salesman and tutor. Annette Kowalski, who had attended one of his sessions, became convinced that there was a great opportunity for Ross to succeed on his own and persuaded him to do so. She invested her life savings in the company, as did Ross and his wife. The business struggled at first. His permed hairstyle came about as a cost-cutting measure when his regular crew-cut haircuts became too expensive. Ross grew increasingly uncomfortable with the style in his later years, but kept it throughout his career. He worried that changing it would hurt the brand, as his silhouette, including the perm, had become part of the production company's logo. The origins of the television show The Joy of Painting are unclear. It was filmed at the studio of the PBS workstation WIPB in Muncie, Indiana. The show ran from January 11th, 1983 to May 17th, 1994, but reruns still continue to appear in many broadcast areas and countries, including the non-commercial digital sub-channel network Create. During each half-hour segment, Ross would instruct viewers in oil painting using a quick study technique from the imagination that used a limited palette of paints and broke down the process into simple steps. Art critic Mira Score compared him to Fred Rogers, host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, one of those words, noting that Ross's soft voice and the slow pace of his speech were similar. With help from Annette and Walt Kowalski, Ross built a $15 million business, Bob Ross Inc., selling his line of art supplies and how-to books and marketing painting classes taught by instructors trained in the Bob Ross method. All of his income, he said, was derived from those sources, and the show was intended to be a vehicle to promote his classes and products. Following Ross's death, ownership of Bob Ross Inc. was passed to the Kowalskis. Ross also filmed wildlife, squirrels in particular, usually in his garden, and he would often take in injured or abandoned squirrels and other animals. Small animals often appeared on his Joy of Painting canvases. That's all the ASMR you get.